Okay. Welcome to the first episode with Sarah Troupe on the new streaming platform. So just wanted to call that out. So welcome, Sarah. Of course, we all know you, and we've been, working together since the beginning of this year, and now we're the end of August.
I can't believe that. It's crazy.
Right? Yeah, the time has gone so fast, but it's been a lot of fun, at least for me, and I hope for you as well.
Yeah, of course.
Okay,
Learned a lot.
Good. So this episode is focused on one of the largest struggles I think we kind of hear from next gen students, graduates, and instructors, is that whole thing around this entry level position requires 5 years of experience. And I know that that's a joke, but there is an element of truth to it.
Yes.
And I've actually seen those types of posts for jobs out there. So
Yeah.
how do we get that real world experience when we're just starting out or have just graduated the next gen program? Well, unfortunately, we didn't find anything there right away, but there are internships and other programs available by some ServiceNow partners, and I know that you're a part of one of those.
Yes.
But in addition to that, you and I decided that we would make our own real world project and then run it like a real world project. So offline, we were meeting once a week for some training and working together to improve skill sets, discuss struggles, and overcome them. And now we're increasing that meeting time, including scrums and starting to write stories and implement them in your PDI. So This is something that's accessible to everybody. But yeah, go ahead and just give us an outline of the project that we're working on.
So we're working on a project for electric vehicles, making sure that they have a parking app and just where they can go and make sure they have the correct hookups, the parking stalls are available, and the times, and being able to kind of plan ahead with your trip to like Legoland or Disney World or something like that.
Yeah. So it kind of spawned from an idea I had as I was driving home. We drive by this grocery store and they've got a bank of Tesla based charging stations, and all we see is this huge lineup every time we drive by, and I'm like, oh my god. So people are waiting in line to charge their Tesla at a high speed rate.
Yes.
And that showed some reservation demands that I could see. So that's the idea where it came from. And yes, it's a parking stall reservation system that's built with foundational data, like you said, making sure it's got the right kind of connector for the vehicle that I have, or vehicles, because the app will support me having multiple vehicles as a user. So let's talk a bit then about the foundations piece. So our first step in this software design, or this app design, was building out the foundational data. Now, can you describe what was shocking to you, if anything, around building foundational data for what looked like a small app?
Well, I will say the enhancements and stories really surprised me, and I didn't really understand it at first. And then I started building the stories with the tables, and then in the process of doing that, I was like, well, it needs data. So that's where the data story comes in, and just really linking those two together and then understanding like the enhancements and then the stories. That the enhancements are like a 30,000 view of the project, and um, how that impacts the stories and how it's all linked together.
Hmm.
Yes.
So yeah, that speaks to a lot of kind of what we're shooting for here, is the having that element of, okay, we have to build our structure first. That's the foundational table structure.
Yes.
We have to establish all the relationships between the tables. So there's a lot of referencing that we're doing
Yes.
in addition to that. And then once the foundations have been built, then we are adding in our foundational data, things like, the parking lots. And you had mentioned like Disneyland and things like that. So to keep it kind of fun, all of our parking lots are based off of theme parks in California.
Yes.
Uh, and we're also using some of the common tables, like the location table, like
Yes.
the company table, when it comes to manufacturers. But we've enhanced or added on to this to support our app while still playing nice with the rest of the platform, so it is scalable in other areas. You did mention the enhancements piece
Mhm.
as well. And this is, our 30,000 foot view. That's kind of what we're using to describe to the business what's happening.
Yes.
And then we have our stories that we're creating, and you're building all of this on your own. So essentially, what's happening is I've gone in as the architect,
Mhm.
written the enhancements, pretending to be the business.
Yes.
And then I've also written all the stories and then handed them off to you, almost like it was a real world project. So
Yes.
the only real difference that we're not doing is that in a project of this scale would normally have a daily scrum, and we just
Mhm.
don't have that kind of time. So we're meeting twice a week for our scrums.
Yes.
But other than that, this is about as real world as it gets. So how have you been finding getting a story assigned to you using that agile development module in your PDI? How have you been finding that?
Well, I will say I was completely confused when I first started, and I was overwhelmed with the stories, and I didn't know where to begin. And I know we
Mhm.
had talked about that, and I didn't understand the update sets. So it was frustrating because I had to learn all the information whenever I passed my CSA, but I didn't know how to apply that, and I didn't have any confidence in doing it either. So everything that I did, I felt like I was not doing it correctly.
Well, and I went through that journey myself, so you are right on track
Yes.
for everybody's experience. And like you said, it's one thing to have the knowledge
Mhm.
and to have the skill set, and now you're learning how to apply it in the real world. And that's why a lot of jobs are seeking that real world experience. You're now going through that journey and understanding what it takes to build an app from the ground up, including setting up the application files and all of those types of things in your apps, and then working those stories and asking questions and asking for guidance when you need it.
Yes.
So that's been great so far. And
I
to
was gonna
be, oh, go ahead. No,
I
go
was
ahead.
gonna
Yeah.
say, like, as far as like these stories, when I was working through them, it I realized that like there were prerequisites, and then I was like, okay, well, I need to get this done before I work on the data, and that
Mhm.
really helped me figure out. And then once we met the first time, and I realized like it's tables and this data, and understanding the update sets, like I was light bulb. I was like, oh,
Mhm.
I know how to do this. So it really built
Yes.
my confidence.
Good, good. And now you're able to see how those skill sets are used in the real world and the differences between them, including things like we're building all of our app work in the application repository because it's a
Yes,
scoped app, but we're setting up separate update sets for things that we're building in global. So, like I had said, we have to add a couple things location wise and to the core company table to support our app. So, those types of things being set in individual update sets accomplishes what in your mind?
okay, hold on, say that again.
So, so by doing separate update sets for individual pieces of of our needs in that global scope.
Mhm.
What is the purpose of doing one update set per small update?
Well, I will say if you bring it into the application one at a time, it like the I think you call it like the risk mitigation
Mm-hmm.
goes down. And to me, it's like you don't want to bring 50 different updates into your application and then realize that the first one that you brought in was messed up. You want to do them kind of one at a time and in different update sets.
Right. You're speaking exactly to the migration
Yes.
piece. So when we're doing these individual update sets, yes, it is adding one update set for a small piece that we're adding into the global scope. But that means that we don't have update set dependencies. We're not
Mhm.
doing a big bang style release where it's all or nothing and we have to wait for it all to be done. We could migrate some of our small changes ahead of time and lay a stronger foundation and test things individually.
Yes.
And like you said, it also does reduce the risk we incur on some of these updates, especially when we're doing things in the global scope.
Yes.
And we can roll things back if we need to. It's easier. So that's been an important part of the real world journey for you too, is not just how do I build it, but how do I deploy this app?
Yes.
And we're taking that in. So
Yes.
that's great. Are there any other pieces of the enhancements in the stories? And we haven't got to defects yet because there hasn't been one, but we're hoping that there will be a few as
Yes.
this is an academic learning exercise.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah.
I will say doing the unit testing, I kind of went back and did that, but then I know I kept missing the active is true on the filter.
Mhm.
And it's like if I miss it on one, I miss it on all of them. So going back and doing the unit testing, I need to do that on every single story just to make sure that everything's good before it goes on to the next piece.
Right. And that's speaking to learning how the whole dev process or implementation process is governed. So,
Yes.
our process is that I pretend to be a business analyst. I write out the business case. I put my architect hat on. Technical
Mhm.
specifications are come out of that. Then I put my QA hat on or my deployment hat on, and then that's where the acceptance criteria comes out for the story. Hand it off to you. You do the implementation, and now you're also unit testing against the acceptance criteria to ensure it's done correctly before you hand it back to me as the QA team.
Yes.
So that's been an important part of the journey and gaining that real world experience, because that does happen in large scale projects and honestly should happen in any scale size of a project.
Yeah, and I will say, like, understanding what each person does, like, it helps you because I
Mhm.
was like, "Who puts this information in? Who does this? What exactly am I doing? What does the BA do? What was the system admin do?" So that was really cool to actually see it live demonstrated.
Yeah, and learn how you fit into the team,
Yes.
right? Because this is definitely a team sport that we're playing. We are not doing this all alone. There's
Yes.
only a few people I know that do it all alone, and they always say, "Oh, I wish I had more people," but sometimes you're kind of
Yeah.
forced to wear multiple hats. I've been in that spot myself, but I always prefer to work with a great team of people because that's how you could really accelerate the delivery and realize the value faster.
Yes.
So I'd like to go back into a bit more of the technical pieces.
Okay.
Can you describe a bit of the foundational table structures that we've been creating and some of their relationships?
Ooh, I would say like the parking stalls, being related to the parking lots, and I don't really have it pulled up,
Mhm.
but I would also say like the location and what was the other one? Oh, users. Like that
Mhm.
was a big, um, like getting the correlation between all those to build it. It was interesting.
Mhm. And can you speak a bit on how some of the tables may be small, one or two columns, but they support a specific piece? So you said parking stalls.
Yes.
So are parking stalls their own table?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you said that they've got reference columns to another table, parking lots. Is that
Yes.
another? That's another table. So
Yes.
you're kind of learning those data structures, how tables reference each other. Would you be able to speak a bit on why the structure is set up in that way?
Um, yeah, I mean, to me, it all correlates. So you have to,
Mhm.
you have to get the table of the location, the stalls, the parking lots. You have to also get the like license plates. Then you
Mhm.
also have to get the users. So if you have someone that's a new user and you have to be able to have their information um, go into the record, so it all has to correlate
Mhm.
into like this big, I would say this big piece, but you have to have individual tables for each one of those. And it's kind of
Right.
like, you were explaining it to me at one point. It's like if you're getting to a destination, you don't want to go north and then south. You want to actually just go from where you're at to south. You don't want to have to hit all these other places. And
Mhm.
that's kind of the way that I think about it. It's like,
Yeah, a direct line. No, that's a
yes,
great answer. So our approach is based on the philosophy that there's no such thing as a story that is too granular.
yes,
So you'll see in some of our work that we literally have one story for one column,
yes,
or one story for a table that has two columns on it plus all the baseline ones. Another piece that we are doing with this is setting up these foundational tables so that we can manage the data in an easy manner when we go hand over to operations.
yes.
So let's say we want to onboard or offboard a new parking stall. We go
Okay.
to one place, we pick the lot, and then we handle that data from there, and then everything else hooks into it.
Yes.
And that's that reference piece that we were discussing earlier too. So you did mention on those reference fields that you were missing adding active is true on the filter. Can you kind of
Yes.
expand on that struggle and how did you overcome it?
Yes. So I will say, I thought that whenever it said active is true, I thought it meant like the actual, button that you click that is the record is active. And that's
Mm-hmm.
what I was thinking in my mind. But it was actually when I went to the reference table, I needed to go down there and hit the filter and make that active is true.
Right.
And we worked through it yesterday, but I will say the stories. Um, have helped me like, okay, you need to go in here and change this. You don't have the display setting on there, and that's the reason why you're not referencing the correct fields or you're unable to see them. So
Mm-hmm.
to me, um, like the stories help me like walk through what I need to change.
Right.
And I didn't realize that I had missed that, and I should have. Well, we learned about the unit testing and going back and double checking that. So that was kind
Mm-hmm.
of the reason for that yesterday.
Right. So, and that speaks to you raising stuff that I missed
Yeah.
as the architect, and you kind of develop, well, you didn't develop because you already had it, but a soft skill in
Yes.
that you asked for clarification and did not go, hey Chris, you did that wrong, even
Yeah.
though that was the case.
Yeah.
I, as the architect, made a mistake and didn't include the display column values for the table structures. Now, part of the real world piece is that our original table story was too far down the road, in my opinion, to be modified. So, what did we end up doing there? Or what did I have to do there?
You created a story for me to go in there and set the correct display on the table.
Yes, that's right. A net new story had to be created. So that added
Yes.
more operational effort on my part, but that happens in the real world so often. So we all know, we've been there, we've gone through this journey and say, oh, well, this piece is missing, or we're, I forgot about that setting. And we have to go in and document it first so that it can be, implemented, unit tested, handed
Yes.
off to quality assurance, actually tested, and then migrated. So we
Yes.
covered that whole journey at a small level, so it was a little digestible and could be a good learning opportunity for you and a great reminder for me
Yes.
as well. So
Well, and just kind of dive into the communication. Like, in the beginning, we kind of, because I didn't really didn't have that much confidence in what I was doing. And then after our first meeting, like we walked through everything, and I felt like, hey, I'm missing something, and we would communicate back and forth, and that's kind of the reason for the, you know, the scrum meetings.
Yes, yes, and that's a great point to bring up. So we did go back and forth via email, well,
Yeah,
technically LinkedIn messages,
yeah,
but asking questions sometimes that way, and we still do that. And we've sent some back and forth, and it's like, no, look here, this is why that's not working. Where the data was in the story, and it wasn't in the story, and a couple times I'm like, check
yeah,
this new story out because I missed it. Sorry, my bad.
yeah,
And then in addition to that, we added those scrum meetings so that we can meet and go through that exact experience with you of, okay, I'm working on this next. These are my blockers. And then we work towards resolving those blockers. Now, typically in that scrum meeting, Sarah, what we would do is park it and say,
yeah,
okay, let's meet offline. Because these scrum
yes,
meetings have, 30, 40 people in a large project. And it's
absolutely,
about identifying blockers, what they are, and who can help fix them, and then you send and handle it off outside of that meeting. But
yes,
in our case, it is a large team of two, and we
yes.
are building and going through the Scrum journey together anyway. So that's been great so far.
Yes, and I will
Okay.
say, in one aspect, I sent you a message, and you sent it back, and I was like, oh, if I didn't put in the information in the beginning, like record two, to be able
Mm-hmm.
to get the parent table in there for like record seven, and I was like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, well, that makes sense.
Yes, yeah, and that's the foundational piece and the order in which some of the data has been provided. So let's dive into that a little more. So what we were talking about there is it was a location record, and we couldn't find the city that
Yes,
should have been the parent for an address
yes,
for the parking lot. And then when we scrolled up, I'm like, okay, maybe I missed it. So first thing I always do is go. I blame myself. Is my approach. Go. Let me double check that everything's there. And this time it did happen to be there, like you said. Oh,
yes,
record 3 is the city, and you were trying to add record 7. In other cases, though, I looked at it and went, wasn't there. Darn it.
yes,
And then we would update the story either on the fly during the scrum,
yes.
or I would cut a new story for you, assign it, and then add all the dependencies for it and the prerequisites, etc.
Yeah, and I will say, like going through it and understanding like the parent tables and the child tables, when I probably looked at that story half a dozen times saying, I don't know that, I can't figure it out. And then it was like the last one, and then I started entering the data, and I was like, oh, well, I understand this. Like,
Mm-hmm.
it really built my confidence in creating everything, because you had to know it for the CSA.
Yes. Yeah. And that real world experience is going to continue to build your confidence. You're still going to have questions. I have questions every day. So
Yes,
don't feel that ever goes away, because in all honesty, it does not.
right.
But what you're kind of seeing through this journey, this new part of your journey, is that everything can be connected. The purposes of being connected, why we're hooking into existing tables like location,
Yes,
like company, and then why we're building net new ones. We're also going to, at the part of our project, once we get through the rest of the implementation, is looking at how does this impact clones
okay,
operationally. What's our migration plan? So we'll build together a deployment plan on how
yay,
we're going to migrate everything. And then we'll cover a real world demo, and we'll showcase it on one of these upcoming episodes.
yes,
So you will take the driver's seat. You will do a PowerPoint presentation that covers what it is, what the app is, some of the key features, the value that it generates, and then a live demo. And we may even take questions from the audience in that one episode, because that will simulate a real demo experience
yes.
as well. So possibly,
I mean,
we have
yeah,
no guarantees on the questions.
yeah. I'm excited about that.
Yeah,
And
definitely. And
doing
at
the,
the end of this, go ahead. Sorry.
I was gonna say, and doing like the ACLs, and just really putting into practice what I've learned. Um,
Mm-hmm.
over this last year and being able to get the experience of the real world.
That's right. Yes, yeah. ACLs is a great thing. That's our next week target.
Mhm.
So we're running in our project 1 week sprints. But as
Yes.
I've said, typically it's a 2 week sprint for a larger project, but we're kind of going a little smaller,
Yes.
a little more digestible. But we're setting all of these goals. And by the end of this week, I believe we'll have all the foundational data that we know of that we need right now set up, configured, and entered into the system.
Yes.
And then some of the interesting parts that you'll notice is all the stuff that now that we're here, we look back and we realize certain things that we missed.
Yes.
And how do we handle that? How does that operate in a real world project without, muddying the waters too much?
Yeah.
So, like you said, next week is access control lists,
Yes.
permissions, how we're setting it up. We will also learn about query business rules,
Okay.
which is another tool in our tool belt to restrict access to data, when to use a query business rule and when to use an ACL,
Yes.
so that we can manage performance, especially because we would hopefully like to be able to also support this app in mobile, because very few people will sit with their laptop open trying to book a parking space.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That wouldn't be
Usually,
good.
it's my partner Kathy trying to book it as we're driving on
Yes.
her phone or my phone. So
Yes.
that's kind of how we're running
It's
this thing.
definitely what I was thinking about is um, maybe having a way where they can, I don't know if they like, if they're there for an hour, if they can add time or something like that. I
Mhm.
know just parking in general in Nashville, we ended up getting like a small ticket because we ran over by like 10 minutes. And I wish there was a way
Mhm.
like we could have been able to add time to it. So that's just, especially if they're sitting there and they realize that, hey, it's not going to take 45 minutes, it's going to take 2 hours, what they can do.
Yeah, that's a great point. And there's a parking app that I use, Pay by Phone, that has that type of thing.
Yeah.
So basically, it's like your parking's expiring in 10 minutes. Do you wish to extend? Type
Yes.
of a thing. So that's a great feature idea
Yes.
that will run through our value evaluator and put it into the backlog if it's going to make sense to implement. But
Yeah.
those types of great ideas are some of the struggles that I see a lot of people having as well, where they're like, well, I don't have an app idea.
Yeah.
And they'll use that as a blocker to stop them from starting.
Yes.
And that's why we kind of just picked one,
Yeah.
and off we went, and we're learning some of it as we go. You'll see in the demo that some of these charging connectors that we're using are actual real world charging connectors, and
Yes.
I don't even know how to pronounce a couple of them.
Yeah.
So you've heard me stumble through them in our scrums.
Yeah.
So
Me too.
we're yeah, and that's okay, right? So we're learning a bit about EVs as well, in this journey, which has been interesting.
Yes.
Okay, so from our point of view, then our next steps are continuing the scrums. So we had our last one yesterday. We're going to wrap up the foundational data piece. So that's on me, I believe, to finish up a couple more stories for you.
Yes.
And then you'll be able to start implementing those next week.
Mhm.
And then I will go through the ACL piece. Now, access control lists are quite complicated, or they
Yes.
can be. We'll discuss the Access Analyzer, ServiceNow Store app as well, because it's a great troubleshooting tool
Okay.
to be familiar with. And we'll most likely do workshop styles where I will guide you through implementing and then testing through impersonation the ACL work on one table.
Okay.
And then after that, it'll be go through it, try yourself. Now, if you need more, more guidance through there, totally fine. I learn by do repetition.
Yes.
So if you need or want, 3 or 4 options to go through this while we apply these different ACL rules, we can totally do that.
Okay.
And then we'll discuss the structure around them. And, you'll start to see ACL enhancements most likely early next week.
Yay. I'm
Um,
excited.
yeah.
I mean, I will say, just like last week, going through everything and then meeting with you, it's like the light bulb has went off and everything service now. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's why I learned that. And
Mhm.
it's really exciting seeing that, implemented.
Yes, I agree, and it's exciting for me too because I really enjoy this part of the
Mhm.
project. It is building, designing, finding the struggles, finding out the stuff that I missed, and then how
Yes.
do so now I'm over in this place. How do I get to where I need to go from here? And
Yes.
that real world experience is going to be of tremendous value to you because that happens all the time. Sure, the situations are different, but
Yes.
how do I move forward in a positive direction is going to help you with part of your journey. And you can kind of add more experience to the resume
Yes.
as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, I hope that you'll be listing this on your resume, and
Absolutely.
be able to do the demo maybe live in an interview that lands you that job.
Yeah. That would be great.
Yeah. Hmm. Okay, well, did you have anything else that you would like to bring up? Or
Oh, I was going to say one
yes.
thing that in the very beginning, when I created the application, I did not change the name and it added a P at the end.
Hmm.
And that was just kind of like the learning curve of, you want to make sure that that information is correct because you can't go back and change it. So,
Well, that's right. Yeah. So that's a great lesson learned on creating a scoped application from the
yes,
start is the naming conventions. Also, in some organizations, if especially if it's a net new instance, you have to set up the 3 to 5 letter company code. And
yes,
then that cascades down to every scoped app from there. And
yes,
then also understanding the implications of having 3 or 5 characters impacts things like systems properties,
yes,
events, things like that. Will also come through in our app and look at notifications and how are
yes,
we going to send those out. We'll look to maybe even integrate things and send out calendar invites so that if I wanted to book a space in advance
yes, that would be
and it's
great.
like for tomorrow, it'll send me a calendar invite and put it into my Outlook calendar. So some of
Yes,
these basic, well, not basic, but some of these simple features that users are already used to
yes,
will help enhance the app experience and increase the adoption rate
yes,
because we can build the best app in the world, but if nobody uses it, are we seeing value? That's one of the big questions and struggles that I see a lot of organizations have is they'll invest tons of time, tons of money, tons of resources, and then go, oh well, only 15 people are using it. So
yes.
our goal is always to drive a high adoption rate with the end users.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, cool. Okay.
It's
Well,
been
I
fun.
yeah, I appreciate your time. I appreciate everybody joining us on the live stream. So thank you so much.
Yes.
And yes, this will be captured and posted on YouTube and LinkedIn now, courtesy of
Yeah.
the new live streaming tool as opposed to
Yes.
the old Zoom one. So thank you so much. And we'll look forward to the next Scrum. And I'll send you a message once I've got your stories delivered.
All right. That sounds great.
Okay. All right. Thanks a lot, Sarah.
All right.
Hey,
Thank
have a great
you.
day. Thank
Bye.
you.